Welcome back to the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators with me, your host, Dr. Asia. And today we're in the studio with, now she said don't call her doctor, but y'all know how I do. Dr. Melissa Leonard-Goodlett, so glad you are on the show today. We were just chatting before we started. Like, it's been a minute since we talked. I think February, and it's April 1st. The time has flown by, and we are just trying to catch up and figure out all the things. She is getting married soon, so super excited for that. And I'm like, my wedding dress came from David's Bridal 20 years ago. So like the whole idea of wedding dress shopping is so, it's foreign to me because I just told her, I said, I went in the shop, I picked out the dress off the poster, I threw it on, and that was it. But I always say this: we're not here for wedding dress shopping conversation. We're here to hold an exit interview. How are you today, Dr. Melissa?
I'm doing well, but the wedding talk makes it fun, because it's stressful trying to find a dress. So anyone out there, they know what I'm talking about. It can be a little stressful. So,
Yeah, it can be. It can be. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
well, I'd like to call it um, varied, a varied career. Meaning, I started off in education years ago in Heidelberg, Germany, in early childhood education. Then I came back to the States and went into pharmaceuticals and the medical industry, and then found myself right back in education on the K through 12 level and then higher education. So,
Also,
education,
we gonna have a
corporate
lot to talk
America,
about
then
then. Yes.
yes.
Yeah, yes. Well then let's go ahead and jump into it. So like you said, you've done a full loop, but tell us about your journey into education. How did you know that education was for you, that this journey of being an educator was for you?
It sounds cliche-ish, but I think that it was already chosen for me because as a kid, I struggled with dyslexia. Wasn't called that at the time, didn't know exactly what that was. I just know letters looked weird and backwards to me. And I struggled. And in first grade, I remember that I purposely sought out to be the class clown because when called upon on to read, I couldn't. But then at home, I would be the teacher with my siblings playing
Mm.
school and house and things like that. And I was the teacher. My family were like, "Oh, you're going to be a teacher one day." And I was like, "No, I don't want to be a teacher." I was going to go into broadcasting or journalism. At least that's what I told myself. But because of my struggles, I knew from early on, I want to say about 6 or 7 years old, I knew that I wanted to be an educator in some sense. I didn't know what trajectory in education, but I knew I wanted to be an educator. So it started a long, long time ago.
So you went directly into education classes in undergrad, or did you take a different route?
I took the route for journalism and broadcasting undergrad. And then I circled back to education.
So tell us about that part. Did you finish up in journalism and then graduate, or what was that like?
I did not finish up in journalism. My dad kind of saw me as a broadcaster, and I certainly like to talk. But what was pulling at me was I knew in my own educational journey, like I struggled to read, and it was support that I got from family and from teachers, honestly, that made me realize, well, it's probably a lot more people out there like me that struggled because it was embarrassing. And so from the time I was 6 or 7, I carried around a thesaurus and a dictionary because I wanted to sound smart because I felt so deficit in it. So,
Mm.
um, so I went off to college and it was broadcasting journalism that I started off with and just got like a general education degree because I realized I don't want to be a broadcaster. I like journalism, but I don't want to be a reporter. So I kind of stopped there, got my undergrad, and then when I got married, went off to Europe, went to Heidelberg, Germany. But when I came back is when I started like education journey, like rigorously. So
Yeah, so
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
my finished up my masters, two masters in education, then my doctorate. I mean, all within quick succession. So it was almost like my being was like, you should have did this before. And because I wanted
Mm,
to do what I thought maybe family wanted me to do,
mhm.
that but came back because I realized it was a passion early on.
Yeah. So, I when you're flying, you're coming back from Germany. This is the part we want to hear. Was this something where you were in Germany and you were, as it was time to come back home, you're like, well, I think this is going to happen when I get back. Were you at home for a little bit? Because, like, to say two masters and a doctorate, it's something in you lit up. And so, what was that moment that you decided when I get back home, I'm going to put the pedal to the metal and like really study education?
It was a couple of friends that I had in Europe that were educators, and I went to, like I said, I worked with very young kids. I worked, I guess it was pre K through kindergarten, and had some colleagues, and we just got to talking about education. And it was from those conversations that I realized, I think when I get back home, I'm just going to enroll back into school and focus on education. So that's what I did. When I got back home from Europe, I started started my master's while still but my job, my day
Mhm.
job was for America. But I was going to school to get my education degree at the same time. Super stressful, but I knew then I wanted to. I felt like I missed those years in education, and I wanted to make up for it. So it happened in really quick succession, um, and I don't regret it looking back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned that your dad was the one that was kind of pushing you in one direction and you decided to go in another.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance? Did you have an opportunity to talk to your dad when you got back and say, "Surprise, I've changed my mind"? And if you did have that conversation with him or other family, what was that like?
I did have the conversation with my dad, and he agreed that it was a good choice for me. Like, I knew you were going to either be talking or an educator or something, and you made the right choice for you. So we did have that, we did revisit that conversation. And even now, he was like, you made the right choice.
Yeah.
So full circle, it was something in the making, I would say, all along. I went off and did other things, but it was there, that love all along for education.
Yeah, so you went through 2 masters and a doctorate straight through. Did you teach in between? Tell us what you majored in. We wanna know.
Okay, well, I taught in between. So I first did multidisciplinary studies because I thought I wanted to be an elementary teacher. Bless my
Why
heart.
why did you smile like that? What tell us a story about that part.
I started subbing at elementary schools, and I love kids, by the way, disclaimer. But um, I didn't know the life of a elementary teacher was so busy. They do it all, and I love kids. I was sick. My immune system could not deal with the environment of small children sneezing and all of those things that happen in elementary school. And so I started off multidisciplinary studies, and then I majored in English and then educational leadership. So all of this was going on. As a matter of fact, I was going so hard at it. My advisor said, when you graduate, you're going to have two masters. I am.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's where the two came in with multidisciplinary studies and my master's in education.
Got you. And you know what? You're right. I taught elementary and middle and taught elementary first. And as far as my immune system, it recovered, but the busyness, I don't think that people understand that elementary school teachers are on all the time, especially if you don't have a setup at your school where you send kids to science or send the kids other places that you're teaching every subject except for like the electives, your
The
PE and
specials, yeah.
art.
Mhm.
Yeah, your specials. And so it is not for the weak. And I remember going over, leaving fifth grade and then going and teaching sixth grade at another school and thinking, oh my God, they have so much time up here. And this is of course in comparison to elementary. In reality, teachers never have enough time. But in comparison to being a fifth grade teacher, the sixth grade, I taught two subjects. I had
Right.
time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it was lovely. So I 100% agree with that. Um, Tell us about your doctoral program and then what you did after that.
So again, this all happened in quick succession. So with my doctoral program, I taught AP. So I went. So after my stint in elementary, I went to high school, and in high school is where I really found my love for. Um, I mean, high school students, they're their own people, but that was easier for me because I've always loved literature.
Mhm.
Always loved literature, and so I was an English teacher for several years, and um, then I one colleague that taught advanced placed advanced placement English was leaving, and thought I should apply for the role, and I did, and in that role, I started working. With high school students transitioning, we were the 1818 program or the dual enrollment, dual credit. And so from there, I would adjunct with the local college as well. So I had the best of both worlds. I would work with young people, helping them with their college career readiness, helping them, pass the AP exam, or even giving them information about it. At the district I was at, a lot of, especially African American students, really didn't know about these programs. So it gave me an opportunity to teach it, to mentor, and then also adjunct at the local college nearby. And so it was there that I really delved into literacy. What I saw is that um, a lot of my students in the AP class, they were taking AP, but their reading, their literacy was really behind. It just didn't match. You're in the class, but I noticed a lot of my students, and even students that graduated and came back, would say, I'm like, why are you back? And they just said they just couldn't cut it at a 4 year. Yeah, they really couldn't cut it at a 4 year. So I'm making the correlation that, okay, a lot of our students are taking these advanced placement classes in high school, but in actuality, when they're not quite ready. And since I did teach English, I'm noticing these gaps, 11th, 12th grade, reading on maybe a sixth, seventh grade level. And I'm wondering, how does that happen? How within a school they graduate you or allow you to take these courses, but then you're not ready? And I didn't research it earlier at the time. I'm like, is that a numbers thing where you get these kids to take these classes? But I noticed that correlation. And even when I would adjunct, I noticed my, you know, college one or English one students, composition students were having like the same issue. And so um, it was from there that I thought I should um, my go into investigate how this looks like in higher ed. So I began asking um, college professors, what correlations do you see? What gaps do you see? And they would tell me, overwhelmingly, that students are just not prepared when they come to college. And honestly, pursuing my doctorate, I thought um, pursuing that for higher ed, because my doctorate is in higher ed and not K through 12. So there was that gap, right?
Mhm.
And so I thought, after having conversations, okay, maybe it would be a little bit easier um, to kind of parlay over to higher ed and work from that lens. Like, okay, the students that are coming in, working with like the trio programs, because they also work with a lot of students that they're still in need. They're still kind of navigating that. So I just decided, go get your doctorate. You've gone this far, and then see how that, in that role, working in higher ed, how that could help you with students that are, those students that are coming in, first generation college students coming into college for the first time. They've got a lot of gaps, they have a lot of struggles, because you've seen that on the K through 12 lens. So maybe, you could help in that role. And so that was my
Yeah.
thinking at the time when I pursued my doctorate.
So this is really interesting because um we've had folks who've kind of gone the same track. They see an issue in education when they're in K-12, and then they go to either start teaching in higher ed or go back for their doctorate or master's to think about how to solve the problem, right? And I want to talk about that, but I also want to think about and pause for a second that you said something that was really interesting, which is that you have students in advanced placement courses who read at a middle school level who were 11th and 12th graders. And there is an assumption, I think, for parents, for families, for community, that advanced placement is the standard, it's the same across the country, and that in order to be in AP classes, you have to have a certain level of understanding, achievement, literacy skills, mathematics skills. But what you're saying is that's not necessarily true.
It's
And I
right.
want to be clear before I ask this next question that I don't think that geography matters. I think this is a national issue, but we haven't talked about where you were living during this situation. So, what city, what state are you in when you're starting to notice these gaps between what students know and what they should know?
In the state of Missouri, and
Okay.
I in particular live in St. Louis County, Missouri. And yeah, it exists where, yeah, the assumption is that if you're taking an advanced placement or AP course, even students like, oh, I take an AP course, so therefore, I have this standard. But as a teacher, you know um, in AP, I noticed that more often than not, there are students who are not quite prepared for it. And I don't want to say, because what an administrator told me at the time was, well, if they show the capability to do so, um, that if they're willing to do the work, and even if they don't, get a 5 or a 6 on the AP exam, if they go through the course, they'll come out the better because they've had the challenges of an AP course. And I think in theory, maybe they thought that was great, but the real truth is I'm noticing this big gap in literacy and reading. And it stuck out to me, and I noticed it, I think, because of my own struggles. Like, I could have been that kid that, um, I mean, I was in elementary, but again, I had a lot of support, but I could have been that kid that was graduating or in an AP course or in these advanced courses, but I'm not quite proficient in reading. And it's you don't notice it until you leave school how much literacy matters. And so I've lately been on this I guess crusade, to help students that are secondary ELA or secondary students or college one even struggling to read. That's a real problem happening
Mhm.
now, where and it's something my colleagues and I started collecting data for. Like, these students are freshmen, sophomores, junior, senior, and they're reading on some of them, unfortunately, in fifth grade level, and they're not in the supported or tiered classes. That's a major issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just so much there's so much to talk about with this.
It
I'm
is.
thinking about my own rearing in Detroit public schools and how I went to a school that was supposed to be for gifted and talented students and took AP classes there, flunked out of my 4-year college and had to go to community college. And for a long time, I thought like it was a me problem. But as I've lived my life and as I was an educator, I've realized like no, the system just kind of said, like, she can do the work, or she didn't get in trouble, or whatever the situation. And there's so many of us who thought because we were in certain classes or we were in certain spaces that it was good enough. And I'm thinking so much about how you talk about students who said they couldn't cut it and had to come back to community college. They're essentially paying for their high school education, right? Unless
There
they
we are.
scholarships or anything. If you're getting a student loan to pay for community college, or you're working extra shifts or whatever you're doing, that means that all the education you should have gotten in high school or even K-12, you're now having to pay for on
You have
your
to pay
own.
for it. Yes, you have to
Yeah,
pay for it, and even your graduation is even pushed off. You go to college and you're not graduating in 4 years. You're graduating maybe in 6 or 7
that
because
was
you're taking
me.
these remedial classes first. And a lot of students, in my experience, that came back to talk with me said in college they wound up taking um, like a remedial class first before they could take Comp One, and that's an issue because you are at that point now paying for what you should have got in school. So colleagues and I noticed that the GPA, where these kids are proficiency wise with reading, they're not quite matching.
Yeah, it's
And
subjective. It depends on the city, the state, the
it
all the
does.
other things. Yeah. So I want to back up a little bit because you said I spoke to the principal about our administrator about this, and they said, if they can do the work. Could you talk to us about that conversation specifically? Because you started to notice, and you're like, I'm going to say something. So what was that conversation like? And folks, if you're watching this on, if you're listening to this and not watching this on YouTube, you missed an eye roll. I just want to say that there was a slight something there. So I just want to put that out there.
I'll just okay. It's just a little disclaimer. They say that educators that we're the experts. Okay, and unfortunately, some administrators don't treat us that way. Like we're noticing this. We're in the classroom. We are working with these kids, these students every day. We build rapport with them. And if you're doing your due diligence as an educator, you're giving summative assessments, formative assessments, and you notice this, and you can present data to your administration to say, hey, I've got these students, and this is year after year. This isn't I just did this one day, but I have
Or
this
first
data.
semester or something.
This is
Yeah.
not first semester. This is what I'm noticing. And I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop. Another colleague and I were fighting for an African American literature class. We were fighting for that, and we took it to our administration, and they've decided no, we're gonna introduce advanced placement into the curriculum, and that was fine. Um, so they, decided not to go and get an African American studies class. They decided to do the AP route. However, when I brought up, and this was maybe a year or so into the program, they just said even if they don't do well or score a 5 or 6 on the AP exam, just if they show that they can do the work, or even if they don't thrive in it, at least they have taken the course. They'll be better because apparently the taking an AP course, it's weighted differently than regular courses. So at least they've went through it. They'll be stronger when they you know leave the course. Didn't make sense at all to me. Um, didn't make sense at all to me. So that's how that conversation went. Like, thank you for letting us know this. Um, and that's when I realized that a lot of K through 12 is very politicized, and I won't say that higher ed isn't, but there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy
Mhm.
in K through 12, and it's like mud trying to navigate through it. So that was a battle I just didn't think I was able to win. So, I mean, you present the information, the data, you work with these students, and if they're set on, for whatever reason, this is the program we're going to keep, well,
Then
then
that's just what it is.
that's what it is.
So tell me from that conversation forward, how long did you teach English, language arts? I don't know all the terms for high school. How long did you teach there? Did you move on to a different school? What was your journey like after that conversation?
Believe it or not, I would say with the conversation I had with my administrator, I will say that since it was a new course at the time at our district, they gave me a lot of autonomy in teaching it, and I absolutely loved it. And I did notice these gaps in literacy. Even with that, I found innovative ways to engage students, and they loved the course. And then administrators would come into the class and say, "Wow, look at this!" So I would engage students in debate, taught AP Lang. So that's taking real world rhetoric and things that speeches and things that we deal with every day. So I taught it on that lens, like, teaching them about using their words, using their rhetoric to invoke change. And so I just added my spin and wound up really enjoying the class immensely. Taught that for about 8 years, and enjoyed it.
Mm.
For about 8 years. And then I went to a PWI, and that's when my life changed. That's when my
And
life
we
changed.
want to hear all about that. So, first, you said you were teaching there 8 years. Students at that time, I'm sure you had, you had the siblings, and you were teaching. You had the big brother and little sister,
I
and the
did. I
community knew
did.
you. Yeah, but there was something inside of you that said there was time to shift, or something happened. What was that situation that said it was time for you to transition, whether you chose that or not, to go from the school that you had really found your footing in and then transfer and shift over to a PWI?
There are, even right now, there are a lot of top heavy changes in the St. Louis area school districts. And I'm sure, all you need to do is Google it or look at local news. But, like with St. Louis public schools, there's just a lot of top heavy change going on. At the district I was in, we had, I was there about 9 years, and in 9 years, I've seen 4 or 5 administrators, like superintendents,
Mm.
um, principals leave, and there was all of this change going on. During the time I left, it was right at the cusp of COVID, and there was another change yet again, like the principal that was recently hired. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is going to be a lot of change. This is great. This is going to work. And he informed us that he was leaving. And I thought, I really enjoyed teaching, but all of the changes there, just I just thought it was time for thought it was time for me to leave. There were so many changes, and administrative changes, so quickly. So there was no continuity in leadership. Once you got used to one principal, there's another principal. And there was all of this change going on. There was interim principals. And so there was a lot of top heavy
Mm.
change. And I thought, let me go somewhere a little bit more stable. And um, honestly, I thought going to the school, which was very affluent in the area, I thought, all right. I'd applied for the school before, a lot of educators trying to get into the school. And I thought, wow, let me try again, and got hired, but I didn't know it at the time. That's kind of where all of my struggles began
Mhm.
as an educator.
before we get into that, I'm interested to know, did you have a chance to talk to any of the administrators as they were coming or going, just to find out why they left, or was it something that just happened so quickly, or you didn't feel like you built relationship with them? I'd love to know if you know what any of the perspectives that those administrators had as they were coming in and out so quickly.
I didn't really get a chance to. A couple of those administrators absolutely loved. They were very integral to my formative years working at that particular district, and they were strong educators and strong leaders. And I admired that. And some left rather abruptly, so I didn't get a chance really to find out why they left. I have heard from colleagues that were there for years that, the school district was more reactionary instead of proactive. So a lot of times we find out after they left there was an issue, but I did not get a chance to sit down and say, "Hey, why did you leave?"
Mhm.
Um so no, I didn't. But it was
Mhm.
a lot. And so um myself and a lot of other educators were just really tired of all the change, because that much change that quickly within an organization, um, there's a lot of fear of who's next, and
Sure, sure.
really the morale suffered greatly.
Sure.
The morale suffered greatly. Um, there was a mass exodus of teachers, and at that particular time, I thought, well, let me do what's best for me, and um, started applying for other districts, and wound up at the school I was at. So
Yeah, so tell us about that, because you said that's where the trouble started. Tell us about that school district and your experience there, what you taught, um, and you got into, like, this is what I thought it was gonna be versus what it really was. So tell us more about that.
so okay. So I applied there again. This was yeah, right at the cusp of COVID. So schools, yeah, right. I applied right, yeah, right during COVID, or right in the midst of COVID, I believe. I know it was still when schools were somewhat asynchronous online, and I applied then, and um got was interviewed. It was a very rigorous interview process. um this is a very preeminent school in the area, and I thought, wow, it looked great to be a part of this school. It's a public school, but it's almost like public private because of where it's located. So I thought,
Sure.
wow, this will be great to apply for this, apply here. And I did. Um, I knew one of the administrators who had left my previous district, and reached out to them and asked, was there any openings? They informed me that there was, and so I applied. Now, I will say I knew when I applied, I knew I was a diversity hire. This was all
Mhm.
within the George Floyd initiatives going around the countries. You
Sure.
every place from Target to schools, and everyone making these DEI statements, and that all
Sure, yes.
changed since then. But this is during the midst of all of that, and so I knew I was a diversity hire. I knew myself, and a couple of colleagues that we were diversity hires. I knew that, but I thought, okay,
Mhm.
I may be a diversity hire, but I'm equipped to do the job.
Yeah.
Um, so even before I started, I informed them. I was very upfront. So I'm enrolled in my doctorate program, and is that okay? They told me, that it would, and I thought, oh, this is even better. I got a school that's going to allow me to do these things. This is great. And in many ways, it was great, because I think as an educator, it doesn't matter what setting you're in. I mean, as far as the students, I'm talking about the students. When you have a love for students, and when you have a love for education, a lot of times you can withstand knowing that you're making an impact on the kids.
Mhm.
But then when an environment is toxic on you for so long, you get burned out. And when you get discounted for so long, especially when it's different from where you previously came from. My previous district had a lot of issues. It did. However, I never felt disrespected as an educator. They had their issues, but I never felt disrespected.
Sure.
And I never felt like the innovative things I was doing in my classroom, um, those were appreciated at my previous district. At the newer district I went to, it wasn't. I began to realize that um, I began to feel like a diversity hire
Mhm.
in there. And I thought initially, oh, this is great. Um, they have these equity statements, and this is great. And this may be a great move for me, but it wound up being very different than what I had thought it would be.
So you said this a couple of times that you like, I'm realizing, like, I know I'm a diversity hire, but I can do the job, and it
Yeah.
sounds like they're saying you're a diversity hire, and we don't know if you can do the job, and we probably don't believe that. So, tell us about when you started first seeing like, "Okay, this is not what I thought it was." What are some of those situations that happened that helped you come to that conclusion?
Well, when at this district, when I started, from day one, there were these programs that if you're still a new teacher to the district. So there is still an acclimation process when you're a new teacher to the district. And I've talked to the PD department and said, look, this is the background I come in with. Um, and I think maybe I could be a benefit when it comes to these particular topics. And it was almost like a one size fits all. Like it doesn't matter what experiences that you come in with or have. This is what we do for new teachers. Um, they paired me up with a mentor. That was their process at that institution. They paired me with a mentor who had, honestly, not a clue about diversity. Um,
Mm,
this was a mentor who's only taught in that particular school. So, no cultural awareness of
sure.
this, this African American teacher that's come in the mix. Did not have the same years of experience, just was like a newer teacher. And I didn't realize that this was a paid, that they got a stipend for doing this. But from day one, never really asked me anything about myself, would just come into, the office and say, how you doing? What can I help you with? Do you need anything? Well, if you're doing this in a room full of people, what might you think a new person might say? Oh, I'm okay.
Yes.
So I noticed then it was like, oh, Melissa doesn't, she doesn't want my help, or she is saying that she doesn't, need help. You're asking me if I need help in front of a whole group of other teachers. You've not
Yeah.
had time to get to know me and ask me one on one like you're supposed to do. Because if you're getting paid for it, then you don't mentor someone in front of a group of other people while they're eating lunch. You go to them and ask, hey, what do you need? So from day one, I thought this is different. If you really want to know me and build a rapport with me, then you go about the proper way to talk with someone in private, and ask them about their real experiences. There was another experience when even a colleague there told me they gave you the worst class, the worst students right now, and maybe it's an initiation process. And I laughed it off like initiation,
Mm.
but it really was some very difficult students. But one teacher asked, how are you doing? I said, well, you got some challenging students in there. She said, really? The next thing I know, I got called into the office like, are you having trouble with the kids in your class? I never said I was having trouble with the students in my class. I do have some challenging students in the class. Um, and I want to situate the context here. at this particular institution, and it's a PWI, and I didn't know coming in that the class level. I was teaching seniors, very first very first class. It was all seniors. I didn't know the I didn't know how it's a district ran by parents, right? I'm going to say that
Yes.
I didn't know coming in that um, it was different from the school I was in, but I didn't know coming in that from day one they're on you about how's my kid doing so that they can get into these I
Yeah.
and that kind of that kind of shocked me when parents. I mean, we're not even really in second quarter yet, and they're all on me about their college essays. I'm like, well, I mean, we haven't really started that. And that was a thing I didn't know until one white male colleague of mine said, listen, let me tell you the real deal. That coming in, they're not going to let you know. You have to have somebody in here to kind of know these things. The school is ran by parents. In this school, they take, you know, seniors very seriously. Like they're very dogmatic about deadlines and all of these things, and they probably should have started you with a different class as you got acclimated to this particular school instead of throwing you into this, because I didn't know. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that this process was this way. So it was just different incidents like that that made me go, wow. But then it's like, well, you've been a master teacher at your old school. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a new school. Two things
Can
can
I
be true.
Yeah, I want to say something about the parents running the school because I came from a district where the parents ran the schools and people saying like, "Oh, that's awesome. The parents are involved." No, this is not the same as involved parents. Parents running a school district or a school and parents being involved is two different things. When we talk, and I'm speaking for you, Dr. Melissa, but when you're talking about parents running a school, for me, it was folks who felt like they can just come into your classroom and sit in your classroom and observe. It was respond to this. We were mandated to respond to parents within 24 hours, right? And if
Right.
we and so for some parents, 24 hours was too long, and so they would call the principal, and then right, and it was there was no you had no autonomy, you had no yeah, it to me, and it for me to be very clear, the district, some parts of the district, the parent, it all depended on the zip code. And our
Yes.
district spanned across zip codes, and it was it was a nightmare, especially when they're not happy with you, they gang up, right? There's that mobbing that parents can do, specifically in my situation, white parents and brown parents as well would do this mobbing where they would all come together. And I remember finding out that a parent group had made a chat and they were trying to figure out how to get me fired. And when a black mom had snuck into the chat and was like screenshotting all the conversation and sending it to me, right? And that's how I really got to see like the underbelly of the school district and how they really know how to gang up and push people out. And so I just wanted to make sure that the audience understands an involved parent is a teacher's dream.
Love it. Love
Right?
involved parents. Yes.
We love an involved parent. We do not love when parents run a school district, when parents run the principal, when parents can feel like they can do anything that they want. Um, and it's so funny that I support a summer program here, and the summer program had some folks from that same district who were setting up like a overnight experience, and they were like the school the families are calling all the time, and I said, oh, what district? And they told me. I said, what school? I told them. I said, oh yeah, be prepared. They're going to be calling about every single thing. This is to a camp that has nothing to do with the district,
Right.
but they're going to push that on to any other space because of their entitlement, right? And I just wanted to pause you to say that because people, if you've never been in a PWI or a space where that kind of privilege exists, you would not know. And I think that some people say, well, that's what you get for supporting PWIs. That's what you get. And it's easy to assume that all white schools or PWIs are like that. There are schools for folk with folks of color in the same, right?
Yes,
But I
yes.
just wanted to pause you and talk about that because, oh, that is just something that we need to understand that these parents are just, ooh, they're aggressive. The word is aggressive.
Very
They're
aggressive.
aggressive. Yes.
Very aggressive, very straightforward. I learned to grade inflate while at this institution.
Yeah.
I learned to grade inflate. It was at an African American like cocktail. You know, the very few African American staff that were there would have these um, meetings, and it was an educator that said, "Have you been scolded yet by a parent for giving like a C or a B?" She said, "I had to learn to not give those. We don't. There's no C's. You don't give out C's or B minuses." And it's very much true.
Yes.
Very much true at a parent teacher conference. Well, my student, my child has never gotten a B.
Yes.
Okay, before.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
this is a more challenging class. They are challenged from the previous year. No, you don't understand. My child does not get B's on essays. And I learned how to grade inflate there because I've had students go to the principal and say, "Well, Miss Goodlett gave me a B plus on this essay." I said, "Your essay was good." "Well, she said my essay was good." "Well, a B is good." I didn't say it was excellent. I said it was good. I realized that um, you're challenged on every corner. Again, I go back to, if you've got the education, the degree, the experience, that didn't really mean anything. If the parent says that my student usually gets A's, then you better find a way to push it to an A. And slowly I began to, this is just not, as an educator, this is just not what I do. Um, I'm equitable in my grading, but I had to learn to inflate because too many B's or too many C's. Oh, definitely not a C. Like, I don't know if I gave, I don't know if I gave C's, honestly. If I did, I can count on one hand if I did, but I learned to grade inflate because it looked, you were challenged if you did that. And so I think myself and a couple of my colleagues learned to try and exist within the underbelly and just don't make waves, don't say anything, stay quiet. Um, and you learn to kind of function like that because if you make waves or say that isn't fair, now it's, you're angry or you're discontent or you should be happy to be at the school. Pay was great. It's not all cracked up what it's meant to be, though. The pay
Mhm.
was great. However, what you have to deal with on a daily basis, even colleagues challenging or undermining what you contribute. I do remember when, because I'm an educator, my previous district, we had great PD came in and said, "Okay, where's our pacing guide? Um, what are the standards for this particular lesson?" Well, what do you mean? I
Mhm.
mean, what's the pacing guide for this? Where's your what standards are we teaching? We teach them. I'm sure you do, but it was told to me, well, our students get 36. Their average is a 36 on the ACT. We're obviously teaching standards.
Wow.
Wow.
Can I
Can I?
pause you for a second because I'm thinking too, this is what's really interesting is that you got to kind of see it's like two sides of a coin in that you had students who should have been getting the grades they got in your last district, right? They were in AP and all these things
Absolutely.
and then you saw what was happening. Sounded like a lot of them were like pushed through to graduate and then had to come back. And I'm thinking about the students in this particular situation in this PWI as well, where their grades were also inflated. And I wonder, not that you have an answer for this, but I wonder how many of those kids had to go back to community college.
I would love to know that data because what I found, again, um, the assumption, it's perception versus reality. So the perception is you go to this affluent PWI, and I even honestly doubted myself as an educator. Wow, will I be rigorous enough for these students?
Mhm.
Am I going to not challenge them? Because of course, when you're at a school district and you have to slow your pace and you're told, no, you have to accelerate your pace because these students are this. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know. Am I ready? Am I not going to challenge them enough? No, no, no. I found out a lot of these kids are struggling just as much. It is not illuminated like at a predominantly black school is not illuminated. It's again the great inflation, and I'm telling a white parent that Johnny is really below proficient in his reading. No, absolutely not. Okay, then he's not, and you don't challenge it because if you do, you might get called into the office, or that teacher. I mean, she's obviously doesn't know what she's talking about, but you have the same thing. Um, just it's packaged a lot differently. And
Mhm.
I worked with many students there, and I thought, oh, I had nothing really to worry about because um, I'm seeing the same challenges here, and and not to mention black students at these schools. Not to mention that they're really struggling. And it isn't to say that some aren't thriving. Certainly, you have these resources. But I noticed that a lot of Black students that were struggling readers in secondary ELA were in these like learning centers where the kids get to pretty much do what they want to do. And it's under the guise of they're getting this extra support. A lot of those students just really kind of did what they wanted to do. Um, and I'd love to do a study on that data. I'd love to do that
Mhm.
study.
Yeah.
A lot of schools that are affluent don't want to skew their numbers. And so I really I'm interested to see how many students that struggle that they don't add to their data, just so this.
Or they get admitted to a school, to a college, based off the name of the school they came from, the high school or whatever, and then I wanna know how many of those students complete college within 4 to 5 years, because that's interesting too, right? There's
Interesting to
just so
see.
many we could nerd out on this, um
I've always said that I'd love to go back and do some research
Yeah.
and see, actually, especially being in both
Yes.
environments. I'd love to see that. And
Yeah.
seeing the struggle, like, wow, they're struggling here too. But you
Yeah.
never really get a chance to see that, um, because of the perception versus reality.
Yeah.
It's
So,
fluid in school, but
I'm sure that was I can't even I mean, I can't imagine, but I can because I was in the PWI school district. Oh, actually, it's interesting because I taught my first 6 years in they're all the whole time the same district, but the zip code was different by 1 street, and it made such a difference in what I saw and family and parent, all the things. It's very eye-opening. So how long were you at that school, and how did you know it was time to transition?
I was there for 4 years, and
That's a long time.
it is where it was. I knew early on that it probably wasn't the place for me. Now, mind you, with all of these things going on, even with my colleagues, oh, so you're going to get your doctorate. Um, so what are you going to do when you do that? Are you going to try and become an administrator here? I just got all of these questions, and I'm a pretty private person. I became even more private there, because anything I said, anything I went through, everybody knew about it. And I learned, okay, let me just keep to myself.
Mhm.
So, um, love the other two colleagues I worked with, African American women, great educators. Um, but I was told, well, you don't act like them. In what way? Have one colleague, very vibrant, and that's her personality. I'm a little bit more reserved. Well, you don't act like her. No, I don't, because I'm me. this is me. This is what you get. Um, but I would get that from colleagues. Oh, you act so different. How did you think I was supposed to act?
Mhm.
What did you think versus what you're getting? Did you think I was supposed to be talkative, loud? I mean, what did you expect? I'm not quite sure what you mean. I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by, you're hard to read or you don't act like this teacher. I did. I don't understand that.
All
You,
the code, right?
the code.
All that, yeah, all that dog whistle politics, all these like, yeah, exactly. You don't act like them. You're not supposed you're different. You're not as chatty. You don't share your whole life story with us. So we can't read you, so we don't know how to control you.
Right. You can't read me. Now, if it's I can help you with an educational question. And I know as I've been an educator long enough to know you form many families. I mean, you're in this together. There's a lot. I mean, that all educators share. Okay. So yeah, I understood from that lens. However, working in that environment, I learned to really privatize a lot of my thoughts. Um, I would notice microaggressions and like, let me just not say anything. I'm trying to get through my program. I'm trying to make an impact on the students. And I will definitely say the students were glad to have black teachers. They
Sure.
wanted me. I mean, it's you're my first black teacher, Miss Goodlett, and it's great, to see or hear your perspective. And so I could never say it was the students.
Oh, of
Um,
course not. Yeah.
no, could never say it was the students, but I knew it was time. First of all, I never thought it was for me. They had these parent surveys, and um, my colleagues would warn me, well, when you get the parent surveys, they can be really hurtful. And I thought, what? Parent surveys? They can be really hurtful. They're going to say some mean things. I was told this. And I thought, wow. And it was for new teachers. New teachers, I think they do it the first 3 years of your service there. You get these parent surveys. And it's really at the discretion of whether the parent likes you or not.
Sure.
Um, my first set, and it goes to HR. It goes to HR.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it goes to HR. So you never know what you might get. And so you're really on guard, like, oh, um, I don't some behaviors
Oh,
that are
let me pause you for a second. So I just want to go back to what I said before. This is what it means when parents run the school.
yes,
So just doubling down on what we just talked about a while back, this is an excellent example of when parents run the school. The fact that their surveys go to HR, the fact that the survey exists, first of all, and yeah, feedback is great, but then you know what that survey is about. And
you know,
then for it to go into your records in HR is wild to me.
very wild. And I've always done this ever since I've been teaching. Even when I was teaching littles, I love doing surveys about myself because I want to improve as an educator. So even if it's a simple survey, but even when I transitioned here, I would do a Google survey about how the students felt I was teaching them. I wanted to get that feedback. Um, and I'll get back to that in just a second, but they had these parent surveys. The first one that I got, um, I mean, I wouldn't say it was as brutal as I thought. And I thought, okay, cool. So I'm in a school district primarily when, I mean, there was some, comments that were off the wall, but for the most part, it was okay to be what I thought to be a new teacher in this district. Um, and I took it, but a couple of the surveys were, not for this school district, maybe in another school district, not good for this school district. And I received a couple of those comments, and I thought, tongue in cheek, what can you do about that? You're not going to like every parent isn't going to like you, just period. Um, but they had these surveys and didn't necessarily agree with that because if you're new to a district, you're still acclimating. How is that fair? And okay, if you get this information, what are you going to do to support the teacher then? Like, I
Mhm.
always wondered and never really knew what um, the purpose of those surveys were for. Because students can do it too. At this particular school, a student could tell on a teacher, and it's anonymous. You don't know who might, you know, complain about you. And those are not good. Those are not good for the teacher if you get those. So there's so many ways, I think, to um, to bottleneck a teacher. So I got those surveys. I can't say that they were horrible, but I just knew based on my administration. At that time, I was going through insurmountable issues. My sister, who's since passed, um, was in a coma. When I first started the school, she was in a coma. And to add on to what was happening at school in my personal life, I was dealing with, a very ill family member. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of support there. In addition to my, going through my program, didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to. Like I could not, I mean, I did have colleagues I could talk to as far as administration. Um, Never came to observe my class. So no support that way. Like my principals, um, head principal never came to really visit my class. Um, I think I got a meeting one time, like, how is it going here? And that was very, very early on. And I said, well, it's going okay. Um, I'm glad to be here. And it was just kind of like, are you doing okay? There was nothing after that to really find out how you could do. I mean, as an educator, you want to be better. And
Yeah.
um, I didn't get either way. Like, if you observe me or evaluate me, what can I do to be better? What do you observe or see? So I would never get that. I would never get, well, you're doing this well, and you may need a little more support here. It was just kind of like, how am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I not? Besides the students telling me I'm doing great, I don't really know from my administrators if I'm doing well. Didn't really, ask about personal things going on with me. And to be honest, looking back on it now, um, maybe I don't know, maybe as an educator, when you're in those environments as a Black educator, maybe I know I felt very ostracized and alienated.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
if I do talk to someone, what'll happen? Um, and I began to physically suffer. So just randomly breaking out in hives.
Mhm.
Um, and didn't really know what that was. Fatigued all the time. And I just didn't know that my dissertation was African American women at PWIs, right? And there's racial battle fatigue. I know that you did your dissertation there. Those tenets are there as well. And I didn't know I would be living it. I didn't know I would be living.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't know I would be living it. And nothing I did was recognized. So I would submit for topics to present at PDs, no consideration there. I would submit to mentor newer teachers. Well, it's full. And then I'd see a teacher who's been teaching 2 years teach, in service teachers. I did that all the time at my last school. Um, and I knew it was time to exit that. Um, no support. I knew it was, I knew early on, but I thought I have to leave this place because now I'm
Mhm.
physically beginning to feel and suffer. And that there was just burnout, and I couldn't wait to get up out of the place. Like I great salary and all, it didn't matter. Didn't matter
Yeah.
what the
When we
salary
get to that
was.
place, when we get to a place of racial battle fatigue, like you talked about, burnout, compassion fatigue, people think that a bonus, a pay raise, a bonus, these things matter. But when you're talking about, like you just said, hives for so many people, hair loss, resentment, anxiety attacks, none of that matters because you're spending the extra money from this district on therapy, on
Definitely
medications.
therapy. Yes,
Yes,
definitely
yes.
therapy. Definitely therapy. And I knew it was just time to go when it was right. It was during the week I found out my sister passed. Now they knew that this was happening. I was very transparent about that. And here in the St. Louis area, there was a major. It was like a there was like a tornado, and so there was a lot of damage. And we had a PD that day. Um, I attended the morning PD, got the news about my sister, and couldn't reach like my team lead, so I didn't attend the afternoon PD. 2 weeks after that, I got an email from my principal saying that, oh, it wasn't professional. Um, you're expected to attend PD like everyone else, something like that. If you have any questions, contact me. At, at that time, I did. I did want to contact him, and so and no conversations with this person. I've been there, mind you, for almost 4 years at this time. So I wrote down my concerns, met with him after school, and laid out my concerns. And the meeting became evaluative. So he started evaluating me as a teacher in the very same meeting. I came to address some concerns with you, some legitimate concerns. How did this turn into a performance review? I knew I knew I knew prior to that, but I knew, okay, a performance review. So I knew something was up, and you can request like union representation. You can request that, and I mean, at the time, I didn't think to say, "Hey, I'd rather stop this and have a union representative come." But I answered his questions. Now he's never done this ever. But now, oh, I want to see your lesson plans. I want to see how, I want to see how you grade this. Okay. Okay. That's fine. So he summarizes the meeting in an email and send it to the assistant principal. And there was a bunch of points that we talked about in the meeting that he didn't mention in the email to the assistant principal, and I responded, well, we also talked about these other issues, personal issues that I brought up that he never did address, and I don't think he liked that. So now I'm getting, so right at the end of the semester, when almost every teacher is either showing a movie or doing that right before the end of the semester and grades are due. I didn't do that. My students had a presentation, so it was a presentation day. And all of a sudden he comes in, and that was my teacher's observation, which I had already done. So I was done with my cycle of teacher's observations, but he came in and did an evaluation. So I get an email saying, oh, I noticed the kid should have been doing this, and that. Again, in 4 years, he's never done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here we go.
And I thought, how interesting that it's at the end of the grading period, end of the quarter, the second to the last day before students go on break. I have so many of my colleagues showing movies, and it's kind of relaxed now because we've done all of our summatives. My students are doing a valid presentation. I believe it, I don't remember the topic it was on, but students had a valid presentation, and he chooses today to evaluate me. That's interesting. I could not even enjoy my winter break because I knew something was up. I just felt it in my soul. Felt it in my soul that something was up. And I had already talked with my fiance and said, I've got to go. I had already said that. I've got to go because it's time
Mm.
for me to make an impact in education in a different way. Previous school district I did love, but all of this, all of the red tape, all of the changes there, but at least they let me teach and enjoy my students and expand my pedagogy. They allowed me to learn. Um, this school district, not so much. Every single move is questioned, micromanaged, or a microaggression. Your everything is just discounted, and so um, I had already decided it was time to go at that time. So I put in my resignation, um, and I'm happy that I did. I don't miss it at all. I put in my letter of resignation when I got back.
Okay.
Um, it was told to me, I don't think you're a good fit for this organization. Is what he said to me. I don't think you're a good fit.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think my being fearless, because I was tired of living under the radar, like, oh, I can't express what my white colleagues could freely express. I began to be silent. And I'm not a pugnacious person by any mean. However, I advocate for myself. I did not the first few years that I was there. But when it came to, and maybe it was the death of my sister and just realizing, you know, everything that I experienced is real, it's valid. And I have a legitimate concern, and I should be able to address it if people are trying to, if in theory you're here to support educators. I'm having some concerns, and let me rewind a little bit. A white colleague that same day of the PD was never talked to, was never addressed. Let me just say that. And that was the reason I wanted to meet with my principal. So there was another colleague, um, white colleague, white male, and he just left. I mean, I don't know his reasons. I know when I got the news that afternoon, it was like a tornado here. There was a lot going on, and it's not something that I had a habit of doing. So let me just pepper that. It wasn't like that's ever happened. My department head knew that. White male colleague never got an email, never had an issue, but this person had been there for years and, part of that climate. So never got, you know, an email. I did. And so that's when I addressed those issues. And it was one thing I've learned over the years for any job. I always write down um, how I feel. I write down my reflections. I'm a writer, so I write. So from day one, when these when I would notice these things happening, I wrote them down.
Mhm.
And so these points, I was able to reference the dates. I had a whole notebook and referenced these things and brought those up to him. And the only thing he said to me before it became evaluatory, well, I mean, I'm sorry. Okay. It was just like, okay, well, sorry. With a shrug, like, sorry. But I wanted to ask you about this. That's how how,
Mhm.
how the meeting went. So after I got back from break, I put in the resignation. When someone tells you, and it's twofold. I already felt burnt out and was like, I think I can be better served um, elsewhere in education. And it was, you're not a good fit. I don't think you're a good fit. Um, that I knew it was time for me to exit out because it's not worth my health, mental health, professional identity. All of that stuff took a hit. It took a hit, and it's taken a long time for me to even recover, like professionally. When you give your all to your students and to your work, um, and they smack your identity like that, it was extremely hard to get to a place where you felt revalidated, knowing like, yeah, I am definitely the person who I am. I am a great educator, and it's not
Mhm.
the awards I've gotten. It's not based on the degrees. It's based on bona fide experience of students that I'm looking at all of the, if I had a wall, I have that many students that have come back to say, you've made a difference in my life. I've had my new teacher mentees come back and say, oh, I feel like I'm a better educator after working with you. It's those things that I had to remember. It was, I mean, I'm a consultant now, but even the teachers that I work with now and their feedback. But it took a long time because my professional identity and sense of self was just obliterated during that time. And it physically took a toll on me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There's so many of us who it just takes time, and I think that there's folks who say, "Well, I'm just going to try a different district. I'm just going to become a principal now. I'm just going to go to the state level," and never give ourselves time to heal and
Oh,
to
it's a
yeah, to think of
relationship. It's a
yeah,
relationship. And after any
yeah,
any toxic or bad relationship, you have to give yourself time to heal so
yeah,
that you're right. Because what I want to do, if whether I'm working with adults or children, I want to work in the right space and not from, I don't have to prove or validate myself to anyone. And I had to get past a lot of resentment. I had to go on a spiritual quest to get back to me and my why in the first place. And I had to go back to that little girl that struggled with reading. I had to go back to her why. I had to go back all of those years and peel back the why and all of the students that I impacted to say, wait a minute, you see this need. The need hasn't went away. You were in a space for 4 years that didn't honor those experiences and did it did it for the, I guess, the diversity kick they were on at the time, but no, it was a checklist, right? It was not real diversity. It looked great on paper, but actually enacting diversity within the system, just it was a buzzword for them. It was, I mean, I'm convinced that
sure,
it was a checklist. Like, what are you actually doing to include your educators?
yeah,
Hiring them and then making them feel included and giving them a sense of belonging. Those are two different things. So when you asked me earlier, how am I doing? I'm getting back on the path of wellness, and that's taken a while. I did not know it would take me this long. I really had some things to unpack, and
yeah,
it it's been really heavy. But now, the more I immerse myself in work and research, and I'm like, okay, your why never left. It never left. And don't ever let an institution or a person steal that from you, because you find bona fide joy, just as much joy as I did as a kid teaching, being the teacher, teaching my sisters and brothers. Of like, that same light is what you have when you teach from the heart. And that was kind of ripped away, and my hives are gone. Like, I'm not at the doctor, being treated for hives and all of these um, physical issues that I had while I was there are gone,
yeah.
so yeah.
I love this so much. And in that same vein, you've talked about the healing. You say you immerse yourself in the work. So tell me, what are you doing now?
So I'm an educational consultant, and it gives me so much purpose to work with new teachers. So me and my consulting group work with new teachers. We evaluate teachers, not, I mean, so we evaluate them based on what they say they need. So I love working in partnership with teachers. And these are 1 to 3 years. So newer teachers, working with newer teachers. with culturally relevant pedagogy in their classrooms, um, mentoring new teachers, and so my group does that. We travel to neighboring states like Illinois to work with teachers, and I love that work. Because if you have a stronger teacher, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but really, when you have a well supported teacher or a teacher with so many strategies in her toolbox, his or her toolbox to deal with this, um, it affects your students. It
Yeah,
affects
of
your
course.
students,
Of course.
and how you show up in class definitely affects your students. My students at my last school could tell every time. They
Oh,
would
of course.
tell every time. They would ask, "Are you happy here? Miss
Right.
G?" "Yeah, sure, I'm happy. Sure, I'm happy." But they could tell. So
Sure.
doing the consulting work, and now venturing on my own to start my own work with secondary literacy, because that's a real issue. And it takes me back to the younger me that was dealing with that. And it had I not had interventions, how that could have easily been me. And now I'm a writer. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I love reading, but that could have not been the case.
Mhm.
And just being out in the world and to not read proficiently, that's dangerous in the 21st century. Dangerous. And unfortunately, underfunded schools, those students are affected the most. Because I've worked at the schools where there's no textbooks. The resources are very few. Like before, yeah, I've worked in school districts where the teacher has to make do with what they have, or go in their own pocket because the school doesn't have those resources. And so um, now I'm shifting to more literacy work, because that's I saw the greatest need there, and I know who it impacts the most. So now I'm pivoting, um, and I'll be honest, it took me the longest time. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a Christian person, and I think God all along was telling me, you need to venture out,
Sure.
do this. And I was just scared, like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
I, I need for this to happen. You know, um, I need this amount of money, and I had all of these excuses about on why it's not the best time to start. And then I listened to some great podcasts, yours being one, some great supporters, and they've told me, listen, going going the route to entrepreneurship and starting your own thing, a lot of people are making it up as they go. Like, it's just to get started. Like, start. You're not going to do anything if you don't start. If you sit and, you know, tell yourself, well, I need these things to happen first, it's never going to be the perfect time to start, but to start.
Mhm.
And so within the last 3 weeks, there's been a lot of personal things happening, but it's like, start anyway.
Mhm.
And I've really been following that, practicing self-care, because I didn't. Um, I worked, I mean, and many educators will tell you this, we work around the clock. And especially when you feel like your professionalism is under scrutiny, I worked even harder.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
Sunday nights, I was continuously lesson planning, continuously trying to prove myself. And that is exhausting, to constantly try and prove yourself when, they don't care anyway, because the narrative is already in their head. So they don't care anyway. Um, Now I can say I'm on the road to wellness, because it took a lot out of me. And unless you experience it, you just really don't understand.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
until you experience it. You may not even have all of the words And I'm an educator, but you sometimes don't even have the words to really express day after day how that makes you feel and how that slowly, eats away at your professional identity and personal too sometimes. But doing that work, working with new teachers and making that impact, having those conversations with educators of all, background, um, has been really fortifying for me.
I love this. Thank you so much. So you've talked about your wellness, you've talked about what you're doing now. I love to know, are there in your journey from your own little classroom as a kid to where you are now, is there a educator or black educators that you would like to shout out?
Oh my gosh. So Mr. Taylor, my sixth grade teacher, awesome. Um, he was funny and made me feel seen. Um, I just, I just remember him. And you know what? I'd also like to shout out. Now, this isn't an African American educator, but I would say I didn't even know I had dyslexia. It wasn't talked about like it is now. And it wasn't until an educator, Mr. Bear, if he's out there somewhere, red hair, and I didn't like him at first because my beautiful black teacher left. I don't know why she left. I was in second grade or third grade, and she left. And our new teacher was Mr. Bear. I'm like, oh, he has red hair. His red chest hair would show in his shirt. I didn't like him. But that man sat me down and kind of realized what was going on with me and reached out to my parents because they were going to put me in special school district. And back then, you know, to be on a yellow bus, kids made fun of you really, really bad. I already
Yeah.
found. And he realized what my issue was. So I would like to shout out him, and like I said, um, he did recognize that. And I was able to get the help I need. Dr. Audrey Lee. She was my first my first administrator um, at um, at my last school district. Well, my previous to last school district. Strong, resilient, fearless, and supported teachers all the way. Loved the kids, but she supported her teachers and Miss Mabel Clark. Those were two very strong African American administrators that um, were fearless in the face of being seen. I mean, they walked in their position and were not afraid who didn't like it, and supported me when I needed it the most. So, yeah, those are some educators I'd love to shout out.
All
All
right,
right.
folks. We've come to the end of our show. Dr. Melissa, I really appreciate you sharing all that you've shared. I know, like I said, this is still fairly fresh for you.
It
And
is.
so for you to come on and say, like, I'm ready to share this part of my life, we honor you. We appreciate you for that. All right, folks, we need you to take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Exit Interview, a podcast for Black educators. All right, peace.